Hey everyone, I'm Better, and welcome to the next part of my top 100 board games of all time. Thank you for joining me here on Malts and Meeples today. So, if you aren't caught up over on the channel, you can check out the previous two videos. I would recommend doing that once this live stream is done, but thank you everybody for joining today. And well, let's talk about the drink. So Malts and Meeples, we always have a drink with us, and today's is yet another old-fashioned, this one with cherry bitters. I picked a beefier kind of, or bigger tasting kind of whiskey to go with this one because I'm not a big cherry fan. I want to have something that balances it out, just because straight cherry extract, I should say, or cherry flavoring, I'm not a big fan of. So this works for me. This is a nice ratio that I got for myself, and that still is a fair amount of bitters in it because, well, I tend to put a lot of bitters in my old fashions just to make it a little bit richer and a little bit more flavorful. So let's hop over to the list. We are going to a party game that last year was all the way up at number 28 on my list and has dropped all the way down to 80. Now, some of that is I now have a few more party games that I prefer to this one. Some of it is I've just played this one a little more. This one actually worked really well over the last year on Zoom. And so I haven't necessarily gotten it to the table recently now that we've been gaming in person again. I have a lot of other games I want to get played, so some of these party games aren't getting played as often. And my number 80 is just one. So I think the last time I played this was for my brother's bachelor party, and it was a fun time because this is a party game, but it is a cooperative game. In it, there's a person who's it, kind of like most party games, and they're trying to guess a word. They have a card facing away from them, 5 single words on it, and they pick between 1 through 5. Then everybody else gives them a clue, and it can only be a one-word clue. So the guesser is trying to guess one word, and the clue givers are giving one-word clues, hence just one. But that also means that when people duplicate clues, so let's say the word is cookie, and this actually happened. My wife and I both wrote snickerdoodle because that's a little bit more, not necessarily a super obscure cookie, but most people aren't going to want to spend the time writing down snickerdoodle. And it's not going to be the first one you think of. But it works well because that's one word. Unfortunately, that means that we overlapped, so the clue of snickerdoodle was not one that the person trying to guess could see. Both of ours were eliminated. And that's a case where both of us just landed on something a little bit weirder, but you also tend to try and avoid the more standard ones just because more people might give them. So it means that sometimes a really obvious or a really good clue might get missed just because everybody's trying to come up with something more unique, which actually makes it harder. So it's a really nice balance. Now, we don't play it quite right. According to the rules, there are 13 clues that you go through, and if you guess and get it right, you keep the card as a point for the group. If you guess and get it wrong, you lose that card and the one off the top. So if you don't know, it's better not to guess. Because you can just say, I don't know, you only lose the card that you were trying to guess. We get rid of that rule just because it's not as entertaining. Like, you want to guess. You want to be able to be like, all right, my guess is cookie. In the case, say you got the clue snickerdoodle. But if you're not confident, you're hemming and hawing. Like, okay, is this really a cookie? Could this be something else? What's going on here? And it's not as fun. So we don't do the get rid of the extra card. We just do the, okay, you have your guess. You have one guess to get it. If you don't, we lose the card. But we don't take the extra penalty so that everybody gets the fun of guessing. My number 79 is new to the list. This one was a Kickstarter that I picked up actually from the retailer, or from the publisher, after the fact, because I was a little bit worried about this Kickstarter when I originally got it. Every faction completely asymmetric sounds cool. It also sounds really hard to balance. Then over on the Glory Hound YouTube channel, I got to see them play it. And if you want to see a lot of really good gameplay throughs, check out their channel. But Merchant's Cove makes my list as my 79. This one is just, it's not my normal thing, because all you're doing is you're getting potions or items to trade to merchants to get points. And that's it. But each character that the players play is completely different. You might be a dragon rancher. You're trying to grow dragons, and you're doing a game where you're managing how you deal with feeding them and other things like that. There's one where you're working a forge. That one, you're doing dice manipulation. You're placing them in certain spots to activate certain things. There's a time travel one where you have two different characters that you're kind of moving around a track. Or there's an innkeeper who works completely different than everybody else because they have their own special phase where they can take some of those merchants and keep them and give them a bed so that they get more points depending on how things go. And there's even a roll and write one. I haven't actually played that one yet, which probably might surprise some people because I love roll and writes a lot. But it's just a really fun game. Alexander Radcliffe from Board Game Co. recently did a video, actually today did a video, or released a video, on games that need expansions. And he had this one on the list. Now, this one needs expansions, and they do exist. So, in the base game, you only have a certain number of characters. I think there's 4 characters in the base game, and expansions give you 4 more, if I remember correctly. And it's nice to have that variety, because once you see the puzzle of each character, that's basically what they do, and basically how they're going to play out every time. So having a few more is really nice, but it is so much fun. Maybe a little bit longer than it could be. I probably won't play this with 4, but with 3, it was a lot of fun. And with 2, it moves very fast. And yeah, that's nice to hear, Studio Lanniston, that you enjoyed it in your one play of it. Which character did you play as? Because I've played as the pirate captain and the innkeeper thus far. And I would probably say that the innkeeper is my preferred of those two, though I did get to see the alchemist, who does kind of like a potion explosion type thing, and the oracle, who's the roll and write, get played. So, nice. You played the blacksmith, which is one that I have not seen yet. Alright, let's go on to my 78. which is down from 35 last year. And this is one that I really want to get played again, because when I've played it, I've really liked it. And this is my sort of hidden role type of game, in that there's a whole bunch of game to it, and not so much just sitting around the table and talking, though there is a little bit of that. And this one, of course, then hidden role games tend to work better with a larger player count, so that's why it hasn't gotten to the table recently. But this one has a fairy tale theme to it, and it is Grim Masquerade from Skybound and Druid City Games. And this one is interesting because you are at a masquerade as these different grim fairy tale characters. And I mean, if Rumpelstiltskin or Beast were at the masquerade, you'd still be able to tell who they are. Let's just ignore that fact. But this game has a mechanic I really like. As your character, you're trying to collect 3 of a item that is your preferred item. So like Cinderella wants 3 glass slippers in front of you, and those are on cards. But there's always then a character who doesn't want that. So one of their lose conditions is that they get 2 glass slippers. I forget which one of the characters. It all kind of makes a little bit of sense as to who doesn't want what or who does. But on your turn, you're just doing 2 things. You're drawing a card, and you're deciding to give it to somebody, or keep it for yourself. Then you draw another card, and do the one that you didn't choose. So if I'm Cinderella and I really want slippers, okay, that's great. I draw something. It's not a slipper. I give it to somebody else. Now that might cause them to bust if they have 2 of that thing and knock them out. Or it doesn't, and now I'm drawing the next one. And let's say Cinderella doesn't want straw or whatever it is. Cinderella draws it, you get a straw, that has to go in front of you. So even if you already have 1 straw, you have to play it down, and that causes you to bust. So there's a nice tension to the game, and you can spend some time trying to figure out who everybody is, just as, like, this is more deduction than social deduction, but in a really light, simple package. And there's always the opportunity that you can, if you think you know who someone is, accuse them of being Rumpelstiltskin, let's say. If you're right, you get X number of roses, and those are your victory points at the end of the game. If you're wrong, they get a rose. So now, when do you make that call? And can you kind of judge by what people have in front of them of what they're doing? It's really fun, plays pretty fast, or turns play pretty fast. The game actually lasts over 3 rounds, which allows people to kind of catch up, because the later rounds you have better roses. So if you do poorly the first 2 rounds, you still have a shot if you're able to identify who everybody else is. So it's a game that I don't think has gotten as much attention as it should, just because the aesthetic is really nice. And this is one that I think at a lot of tables it would go over well. Alright, so that was my 78. My 77 dropped from 66. And this is a dice crafting game. So probably basically takes it down to 1 game for most people. And that is going to be Dice Forge. This is a fairly simple game, fairly straightforward game in what you're doing, but it has a really cool twist and a really cool kind of toy factor to it, because you're playing everybody's turn. You take your 2 dice and you roll them. If it's not your turn currently, you still roll on another person's turn, you just get the resources or victory points, whatever it is that you're collecting. For the person whose turn it is, you roll, you get your resources or victory points, and then you get to purchase stuff. You get to purchase cards that are going to give you more victory points, or you can purchase different die faces. So I forget what they term like the two different currencies as. There's, well, three, I think. There's money, there's orange and purple, and you can improve it so that, say you take off a 1 money side and you can put on a 3 money side, or you could just put on something that gives you a victory point, or maybe 2 orange instead of 1. And you build up kind of your engine, and you're engaged well enough throughout the game because every turn you're having to roll. What the other person's doing on their turn probably won't affect you, but you still get to do something every turn, and turns go quite fast, especially in a 2-player game. Like, you can knock out a game extremely fast if both people know what they're doing. And even in a game that I played where 2 players had a fair amount of analysis paralysis, it still worked well, and the game still moves fast enough. Plus, there's an expansion for this, which I don't have yet. Probably will get. I just need to. I've played this game several times, just not my own copy. But it's so much fun because of the toy factor. And, I mean, the theme is whatever, but it works. It's still just fun, and there are a lot of different ways to score points. So, it's a good game, and with the toy factor, a good one to put out in front of people who might not like board games quite as well. They still need to know how to play some basic games, probably like Settlers of Catan, Ticket to Ride. They should be quite familiar with those, just so that they can pick up this a little bit more than a gateway game. So my 77 is Dice Forge. 76 is also going to be new to the list. And this is a genre of games that I've actually picked up a lot of games in recently. This is the only one of them that I've gotten to the table. And that's going to be Claim. This is a 2-player trick-taking game. And there are ways to make it 4-player, but it's a 2-player primarily trick-taking game that is really interesting because in this game you're playing 2 hands, basically. Your first hand, fairly standard trick-taking. You're playing down a card, and your opponent plays down 1 matching suit if they can. Well, for sure that's Scott Alms. And I'm not sure on the artwork. It definitely has a bit of the Miko feel to it. Let me see if I can find that quickly here. But in the game, like I was saying, you play down a card. And, oops. We're going the wrong way here, folks. Even though I'm not on the video thing, it still adjusts. So, no, it does not look like it is the Miko. Looks like Scott Alms potentially did some of the artwork himself. But, unless the Miko... Oh yes, that is the Miko. Never mind. It listed his actual name, which is not normal for me to see it that way. So, yes, Scott Alms and the Miko. But in this game, you're playing down a card, a fantasy race, to then get a... You're basically battling over a card that you're going to put into your next hand. So your first hand of cards is basically trying to win tricks to get your next hand. But if you lose the trick, you just get a face down card from the top of the deck for your hand. So sometimes, let's say with the goblins, who are somewhere there hiding behind the throne, if there's a 0 goblin that you're fighting over, you're actively trying to lose that trick the first time around. The second hand now is kind of where you're trying to really win tricks. You're trying to get the majority in 3 of the 5 suits, or just the majority, more majorities than your opponent. But each character generally has their own special power. For example, like the skeletons on the front there, or zombies, mummies, I forget what they call them in this one. If you win a trick with them, even in the first round, you get them. Whereas the dwarfs, in the second round, if you win a trick with them, you don't get them. The loser actually gets to keep the dwarves. Or the knights always defeat a goblin. And the last one up there, the kind of shield guys, they're doppelgangers. You can play them as if they were any suit. So it creates a really interesting gameplay as you go along, because you're first trying to set up your hand, which includes intentionally trying to lose some tricks, to then hopefully just destroy the second time around. And sometimes you get really lucky with a blind pull off the top. Sometimes you intentionally don't take a 0 goblin to just draw a 0 goblin to put into your hand. Alright, so I started spoiling these accidentally because it still moves it even if I'm not on that window. So let's just go straight on to my 75 Small World, which is down from 55. And Small World is a classic game at this point. It's a modern classic up there with the likes of Pandemic, Ticket to Ride, Catan. Probably a little bit less known, but not that much. And it's probably a little bit less played because people are worried it's going to feel like playing something like Risk. And I always describe this game as Risk, but fun. Now, I've had fun playing Risk, and playing Risk Legacy was an absolute blast. But Small World takes a really long game like Risk, that has a lot of luck to it from rolling dice, and says, we're going to do away with that. We're going to make a shorter, tighter game. You don't have to worry about rolling dice. You can take over a territory simply by having enough guys. If you have, let's say there's 2 guys in the area, all you need is 4 to take it over. And it's just fun. Plus, this gives kind of a modern twist to something like Risk. In Risk, everybody is the same. You have your troops, and that's it. And that's kind of all that you see. And yeah, Studio Lanniston is saying that Small World was one of the first they bought, or if not the first, they bought for themselves, because the art is cool. And it definitely is cool art. It's more cool art than, say, Catan or Carcassonne or Ticket to Ride have ever had. Whether or not this is cooler art than King of Tokyo, which is another of kind of that age and style of game, that's questionable, but it is one of the best ones. But you're always playing a combination of race and power, which means that you get to do special stuff. You might be flying sorcerers, and if you are in an amazing position in the game. But you could be seafaring giants or underground ghouls or spirit tritons. There's just all sorts of weird combinations, and the combinations change up every single game because the power and the race are not connected to each other. So you just shuffle up the powers each time and go. And it's a blast every time I play it. It's one where if we're not sure what we want to play and we want to play something that everybody already kind of knows, Small World is one of the go-tos for that, just because it feels a little bit more gamery with the powers and abilities, but still is so easy to just sit down and play again. Alright, I think this is the last one I spoiled. And this is what they call on the Dice Tower Star Wars in a Box. This is kind of the original trilogy, kind of, that you're playing through. And that's Star Wars Rebellion. This is a 2-player only game, and this is a massive 2-player only game. Now, technically you can play it with 4, but that just means that you're splitting up what each player is doing over 2 people. This game has one person playing as the Empire who is trying to track down and destroy the Rebel base, but they don't know where it is. So they're sending out probe droids, they're trying to stop the Rebel incursions on stuff, stop them from getting support on planets. It's just a game, or that's basically what they do, whereas the Rebels, they're trying to subvert the Empire's plan. They're trying to do missions which is advancing their own track kind of down towards the turn track, and it just works really well. It's a 3-hour game for 2 people, but it's always so much fun when I play it. It's one that I don't actually have in my collection, and actually has dropped from 37 to 74, but it's one every time it goes on sale somewhere, I'm like, okay, is this the time I'm going to add it to my collection, because it works. It works because it feels like Star Wars. And the combat might be a little bit weird or too simple for some people. Just die rolling, not enough you can do to change it. But there are some things, and to me the combat is not the main part of the game. It's kind of the going on missions, trying to get more planets under your control, getting your production set up so that you're getting more troops and more ships and everything to deploy onto the map. If you're the Empire, you're trying to get that Death Star built so that you can immediately go and blow up a planet, which, from what I've seen of the game, 95% of the time is Kashyyyk. Sorry, Wookiees, it's nothing personal. It's just a planet that is kind of in the middle, close to where generally you start the Death Star. But this is not a game that I would necessarily recommend to everybody. If you're watching this video, odds are you're probably a fair amount of a gamer. And if you're looking for a bigger game, 2-player game, head-to-head game that's not just like some skirmish or magic or something like that, this one is a really good game for that. Definitely a lot of fun, definitely Star Wars in a box. My 73 is probably going to be the biggest drop of any game that I've had, because it's dropping all the way from number 10. And this is a game that I've played twice through the whole game. It's a legacy game. And I'd play it again gladly because, while I remember a lot, I don't remember everything from it, and that's Pandemic Legacy Season 1. This game basically takes Pandemic, and you start playing Pandemic. You're trying to cure diseases. But as epidemics happen, as you play through the game, all of a sudden, things change up. Your objectives change. You're now looking to track down how this disease started that is kind of taking over the board over the span of months. So each game, if you win, is 1 month. So if you do really well in Pandemic Legacy, you paid $70 for a game that you played 12 times. Probably not going to do that, because most people probably won't win every single game. You lose resources, you lose funding basically, the better you do, because you don't need it. You can allocate it to something else. So all those special events, now you're getting less of them, making the game harder to play, and it's a lot of fun. It's one of the first, it is the first Legacy game experience I had. I played Risk Legacy, which was published after I actually played the first 2 seasons of Pandemic Legacy. And this one, like I said, it works. It's a lot of fun. It's Pandemic, so if you have people who like Pandemic, this is going to be something that they already know. But then, the further you get into the game, it's less something they already know. And it's offering new challenges and new puzzles for them to solve. And it's a really good time. That's going to take us from 73 to 72. And 72 actually moved up from 85 last year. And I didn't even get to play it. However, I now own it, which, seeing it on my shelf, might be some of the reason why I like it better. And that's going to be Root. Root looks like a cute game. I mean, look at the mouse, the bird, the cats, that little raccoon. This is a really cute looking game that is very, very cutthroat. You are battling for supremacy over the forest in Root. And the cats just want to get area control. And this is a game that's hard to get to the table. This is what probably could be considered a lifestyle game. And Studio Anderson, steak. That sounds like a pretty good dinner. So I don't blame you for needing to go and eat steak right now. I wouldn't go immediately and eat steak right now if it was me, because I'm the person streaming. But if I was the person watching and I had the option to eat steak, I might head out to do that. But this, back to the game, is an asymmetric game. Every single faction is doing different things to get points to win the game. The Vagabond is crafting all sorts of items to make them able to move farther and do more things. The cats, it's simple area control as they spread out. And it's a lot of fun. The one that I've played out of the base, and there are expansions, which I own them, but the Airy, so the birds are fascinating to play, because each turn you have the ability to program in another card to this order that says, alright, first I'm going to roost, which gives me more birds onto the board, but I can only do that if what I have matches up correctly to the spots that I'm at where I can do that. And if I can't, then that blows up your whole thing. You lose some points. You have to start building up that engine over and over again, because the birds are very particular about it. And the birds were so fascinating for me to play. And the Woodland Alliance, the little mice, they're in there trying to kind of pop up and get a foothold between these two powerhouses of the birds and the cats, and actually can be one of the stronger ones if you know what you're doing with them, but they're also one of the harder ones, I think, to get full understanding of what you're supposed to do right away. Root is just... it's a game that, like I said, now that I own it, I'm just like, okay, I want to get this back to the table. I want to play this again. I want to try bringing in some of the other factions. There's a lizard cult or all sorts of different... I mean, I think there's something like 8 different factions now. Something like that, maybe more. Different maps you can play on, so the game will be different even if you're playing the same characters with the same group. And it's really a little war game, almost, as you're pushing and pulling for dominance, just in different ways. Now, downside of this game is that everybody is very asymmetric. So whereas Merchant's Cove, earlier on this list, was an asymmetric game, but players only really had to know what they were doing. In Root, you have to know what everybody's doing, because every character, it doesn't matter who you are, you have to keep the other characters in check. So it can be a little bit harder to get to the table, though, because of that, because it takes a really long time then to teach the game. I think the time that I've played it, or the first time I played it, it was something like an hour teach for an hour and a half game. Still, very much worth it, but that's why I say this is a lifestyle game. Because I think, now that I've heard all of them taught, and I need a refresher because it's been a little bit. But once you know 4 characters and had those all taught to you, you can play any of those fairly easily. Like the Woodland Alliance definitely is a bit trickier, but can be powerful if you can figure it out. And it's just a good one to get to the table as something that's fairly mean and cutthroat, but as cute as it is, it's hard to have like bad feelings playing the game. And that's gonna take us to number 71. And 71 is one of the games that has bumped just one down. And this one is one I actually could have demoed and picked up in Gen Con 2019, but I didn't. And I only got around to picking it up this past year when it was at Target. And this is a game of trying to read your partner's mind. That's going to be medium. So this is another game, and I believe I've written about this not that long ago. I think kind of talking about what makes a good party game that does not do one of the things that makes a good party game. So I do have a house rule. I'll talk about it towards the end once I explain how the game works. In medium, you and the person you're paired up with for this round each have a handful of cards. If it's your turn, you play down a card. It might be something like stake. Then the next person plays down a card, and it might be something like let's go with, well, who knows what. Let's go with tree. So we have steak and tree, and steak as in the cut of meat. And the two of you have to sync so that on the count of 3, and you have time to think about it, but once you both have a word in mind, you count out 1, 2, 3, and you both say your word. You're trying to say the same word. If you get it right on the first time, you take a level 3 reward. That can be something like 5 to 7 points or something like that. If you're wrong, you now have your 2 new words. and you try to come up with something that brings those two together. Whatever is in the middle, whatever that might be. So, if you get that right, great, you get the level 2 point. And that could be something like 3 to 5. You get that wrong, you take those 2 new words and try again. And hopefully you're getting closer each time, so that after that 3rd time, you can get either 1 or 2 points. But if you're wrong, you don't get any points. And sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes you just have something that goes really well with steak. Steak and farm. Alright, cow. That's what I think. But steak and tree? I mean, even though I know the spelling of steak is S-T-E-A-K in this case, I'd still be really tempted to say something like vampire. That's just me. That's how my mind works. And you have to think like, okay, how much does the person I'm paired with know me? And how much do I know about them? And how do I have to try and reach to get that middle ground? Because sometimes, like, I might think vampire, but everybody else is seeing it how it's spelled and is going to try and come up with something like, okay, knife or grill. Like, grill is a great one because you can use hardwood charcoal in a grill. So, where do you land on it? It's just a lot of fun, a really good party game that, we'll get to the house rule now, doesn't really end or play as ideally as I'd like. So, in the box, there are different groups of cards, different kind of categories. And you're supposed to take, I think, 3 different categories and shuffle those together. I think there are 6 total in the box. And then you're supposed to slot in, kind of randomly, these clocks or bells or something like that. And as you find more of them, eventually the game will end. Like, once you get to a certain total, the game ends. But that's very arbitrary and random. And it's a little bit less interesting than, say, we all just match up with everybody else at the table. So, in a 6-player game, which I've done, I match up with all of the 5 other people once. They all match up with one of the other people once. And it gives you a really nice, even ending. And I think the other way there's an even ending too. But it's just a little bit longer or a little bit more random as to when you end the other way. Plus, I like to take all 6 different categories and shuffle them together. That means it's a little bit trickier because who knows what you're going to have in your hand? Who knows what cards you're even going to be able to pick from to play down? But it is a really fun game, and honestly, I think it'd be fun the way they have it, too. It's just a lot of fun the way that I house rule it. So, let's go back over the list. We started and ended with a party game. At number 80, we have Just One. This is a great cooperative party game. If you were going to take one to the holidays coming up here, Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever sort of celebration, Kwanzaa, you're going to be going to. This is a great one because it is cooperative, and so that means there's less hurt feelings than a lot of, say, maybe the board games that are at Grandpa and Grandma's house. At number 79, we have a really fun, beautiful, asymmetric game, engine building manipulation game of Merchant's Cove. Very asymmetrical, but still really easy to get to the table. At number 78, we have a deduction game, the Grim Masquerade, where you're trying to figure out who everybody else is and also trying to collect a full collection of gifts so that you win the round. 77, we have Dice Forge. This is a game with great toy factor as you're building out an engine that is powered by rolling dice. But these dice you have, you can pop off sides of the dice to buy different sides to put back on, improving your engine of what you're doing in the way that you really want to go. Then at number 76, we have a trick-taking game, Claim. This one is a fun one because, well, you have silly fantasy powers with it, and I have some expansions I really need to get to the table, but you're first trying to win tricks or lose tricks to build your hand for the second round, and that second round is when you're trying to win tricks or lose tricks, depending on the characters, to get area majority or faction majorities going for you so that you can win the game. Plays really fast, a little bit random, but like I said, a lot of expansions, so a lot of fun combos you can play with. At number 75, we have Small World. This is Risk but fun. Now, I say that half jokingly. I don't hate Risk. I think that Risk is a fine game that I liked a lot growing up. This, though, has completely replaced it for me because it's less random area control and less random power, or random area control, no or very few dice rolls, and you have powers in a race that give you all sorts of special things that you can do. And you can change that up throughout the game, which is something I didn't talk about, that sometimes you just get beat up so much that you're like, all right, well, I'm done with that race, power combo, and on to the next fantasy race and power. At number 74, we have Star Wars in a Box. If you want to play the original trilogy, this is a great game. You are either trying to subvert the Empire as the rebels or as the Empire trying to find the rebels' base and blast them out of the sky. Then at number 73, we have Pandemic Legacy Season 1. This game, like I said, has dropped a long ways for me, but it's still an amazing game. It's one that I've played through the Legacy campaign of twice. If you want to see some of that, I have it over here on Malts and Meeples from a few years ago at an old place. So totally different background, totally different setup. Still a really good game. And honestly, I'd gladly play this again, almost more so than playing base Pandemic again. It just works that well. Then at number 72, we have a cute looking game of Woodland Warfare. This is a cutthroat, mean game where you're trying to beat back your opponents, score points, and be the one who takes over the forest or rules the forest. So much fun, super asymmetrical, super long teach. This is very much a lifestyle game. And my number 71, we have another party game, and this one is a game of trying to match with your partner to guess the word in between the two words that you guys have played down. There's no right answer. You just have to match with what the other person says. Really fun. Stressful when it's your turn because you're trying to get it right, and everybody else who's playing, even if they're not your partner, they're going to come up with a word as well, and they're going to do it way faster than you. It's a guarantee. If it is your turn, it will take you 2 minutes to come up with any idea that sounds half good. If it's not your turn and two other people are doing it, it will take you 10 seconds. That's just how this game works. It is a blast. Such a good time. And that's it. That is the next 10 on the list out of my top 100 board games. So, as I say, or as I've said the other times, every Wednesday from now, well, from 2 weeks ago, till the week before Thanksgiving, in the United States, Canadian Thanksgiving is separate. And I only say that because Studio Lanniston, I believe, is in Canada, if I remember correctly. And so, through then, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central Time, going to be doing the next 10. And I mean, I won't say that there's any in the next 10 that will shock you because, well, honestly, I have no idea what will shock you. But you'll have to join then to see what I have. If you want to know when I'm going live, subscribe to the channel. You can click the notification bell for the channel, and that will tell you whenever I go live. That will tell you whenever I add a new video. Otherwise, I do have some of these pre-scheduled out. You can always click the notification bell on those. There are a few links below for nerdologist.com, as well as the 10-Minute Marvel YouTube channel and a Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I mean, really, that's what matters. If you're enjoying this, please give the video a thumbs up. If you want to help support the channel financially, there is the Patreon option. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I have a little bit left here. So, bottoms up.